The 80th anniversary of the liberation of the Buchenwald concentration camp was commemorated with a ceremony in the German city of Weimar. It was attended by the country's former president, Christian Wulff. In a speech at the event, he warned against radicalization and a worldwide shift to the right.
Aufgrund der Verrohung, der Radikalisierung und eines weltweiten Rechtsrucks kann ich mir inzwischen, und das macht mich beklommen, deutlicher vorstellen, wie das damals geschehen konnte. Das ist für mich erschreckend, sodass ich es für zwingend halte, dass die heutigen Generationen ihr Engagement verstärken, für unsere Werte aktiv mit Mut und Haltung einzutreten, um Dämonen des 19. und 20. Jahrhunderts nicht zurückkehren zu lassen.
Wulff also criticized the rise of anti-immigration sentiment championed by the far-right Alternative for Germany party. The former president, who belongs to the Christian Democratic Union, called for active commitment to democracy and the preservation of humanity. The Buchenwald concentration camp was established in 1937. At its peak, the camp and its satellites housed close to 300,000 inmates. More than 55,000 of its prisoners were killed by Nazis or died as a result of hunger, illness, or medical experiments. The camp was liberated on the 11th of April 1945.
European equity markets have experienced their worst session since the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020, triggered by U.S. President Donald Trump's global trade tariffs announced last week. On Monday morning, the Euro Stoxx 50 fell 6%, following an equally dramatic downturn in Asia as well as the United States. The German DAX sank 7.2%, also marking its most severe session since 12 March 2020. Trump reiterated his commitment to eliminating U.S. trade deficits, particularly with China, while denying any intention to fuel market turmoil.
Es bleibt jetzt nur eines, nämlich ein relativ schnelles Gegenlenken. Das Eingeständnis der totalen Unfähigkeit des US-Präsidenten ist das, was jetzt notwendig ist. Wir werden auch schon sehr schnell jetzt an die Märkte darauf achten, welche Wörter genau gewählt werden von seinen Kabinettsmitgliedern.
Europe's banks and industrial sector were the hardest hit by the sell-off. European policymakers reacted swiftly with discussions underway on a coordinated retaliation.
U.S. President billionaire advisor Elon Musk has said he hopes that the U.S. and Europe can create a very close, stronger partnership and eventually establish a zero-tariff free trade zone. Musk said this in a virtual speech at Italy's ruling far-right Lega Party Congress on Saturday, adding that he had advised U.S. President Donald Trump about a potential free trade zone.
I hope it is agreed that both Europe and the United States should move, ideally, in my view, to a zero-tariff situation, effectively creating a free trade zone between Europe and North America. That would be that's what I hope occurs. And also more freedom of people to move between Europe and North America, if they wish. If they wish to work in Europe or wish to work in America, they should be allowed to do so, in my view.
Musk's comment came after China hit back at the U.S. with 34% tariffs, which caused markets to slide even further by margins not seen since the COVID pandemic. Meanwhile, on Sunday, EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen reiterated the EU's commitment to negotiating with the U.S., while also saying it will defend its interests through proportionate countermeasures if necessary.
Canada is urging Europe and the rest of the world to retaliate against Trump's sweeping tariffs. Foreign Affairs Minister Mélanie Joly told Euronews her country had no choice but to respond with $60 billion worth of counter-tariffs. Joly says Europe and Canada need to defend themselves.
Not only are we leading the charge, we're the country at this point that has imposed counter-tariffs the most against U.S. goods. We're working with the EU. I had just a conversation with the EU Trade Commissioner Sepkovich. We're working also with Asian partners, and we'll continue to put maximum pressure.
Jolie, reiterating that Canada is the US's biggest trading partner, remains confident that the American people are in disagreement with the White House's latest actions, as she believes they have a role to play in resolving the conflict.
The only way for President Trump to back off on his trade war is for American people themselves to say it's enough. And they are the ones that can create the political pressure within their own system to make sure that that's the case.
Jolie also discussed why Canada needs to ensure that NATO remains united, emphasising that geopolitical chaos would only worsen global tensions.
We need to fight for our own interests, maybe on a trade war, or making sure that we have a united NATO. Because ultimately, who is gaining from all this? The erosion of the international system or some tensions amongst allies is our adversaries. It is China and Russia.
You can listen to the full episode next Monday on the Europe Conversation.
Foreign Affairs Minister of Canada.
Convicted last week of embezzling public funds and banned from running for office, French far-right politician Marine Le Pen addressed a crowd of her supporters on Sunday in Paris. The National Rally Party leader said she had fought injustice for 30 years and was prepared to continue the fight.
Ils sont pour nous, ils sont pour moi évidemment, une raison supplémentaire de ne rien lâcher. Et que chacun soit rassuré, je ne lâcherai rien. L'humiliation, tout comme la vengeance ou le concept de tableau de chasse judiciaire, tout cela est à l'opposé de l'idée que je me fais de la justice. Tout cela me fait horreur.
Thousands of supporters gathered at Place Vauban near the tomb of Napoleon in Paris for what was billed as a protest, but observers said it had all the makings of a campaign rally. Last Monday, a court convicted Le Pen of embezzling EU funds. She was handed a partially suspended prison sentence and banned from running in elections for 5 years.
French President Emmanuel Macron has called for the return of a ceasefire in Gaza after meeting with his Egyptian counterpart Abdel Fattah el-Sisi in Cairo. He also urged the lifting of Israel's blockade on humanitarian aid.
Nous condamnons la reprise des frappes israéliennes à Gaza, qui constitue un recul dramatique pour la population civile, les otages, leurs familles et l'ensemble de la région. Nous appelons à un retour immédiat au cessez-le-feu, à la libération de tous les otages encore détenus par le Hamas à Gaza.
Macron's meeting with el-Sisi comes after Israel ended its truce with Hamas last month, cutting off all humanitarian aid to Gaza and resuming its airstrikes and ground offensive. Egypt and Qatar have served as key mediators in ceasefire negotiations between Israel and Hamas. El-Sisi echoed Macron's call for an immediate ceasefire and also rejected calls for the displacement of Palestinians from their land, something U.S. President Donald Trump has previously suggested.
A few dozen protesters gathered outside Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's home, calling for a deal securing the release of all hostages in Jerusalem on Monday. The rally marks a year and a half since Hamas militants attacked southern Israel. One grandmother of a hostage has a message for Netanyahu.
אתה בארצות הברית ואתה צריך שם לשבת עם הנשיא טראמפ ולגמור עסקה שכולם יצאו החוצה הביתה. אנחנו מצפים לזה.
Later on Monday, Netanyahu and Trump are set to meet in Washington, D.C. Last month, Israel broke the ceasefire with Hamas by bombing Gaza after pressuring militants to accept new ceasefire terms, a move backed by the White House. Israel has also halted all food, fuel and aid supplies to Gaza.
At least 32 Palestinians were killed in Israeli airstrikes across Gaza, mostly women and children. Israel resumed the war 3 weeks ago following the breakdown of a fragile ceasefire with Hamas. Daily strikes and ground operations have taken place since, killing more than 1,000 people, according to a UN report. More than 50,500 Palestinians have been killed so far since the start of the war in October 2023, according to the Hamas-run Gaza Health Ministry. On Sunday, Israeli strikes targeted a tent and a house in Khan Yunis in the south, killing 5 men, 5 women, and 5 children. Another strike on the Jabalia refugee camp in the north killed at least 4 Palestinians. A strike in Gaza City targeted people waiting outside a bakery, killing more than 6 people, of which half were children. The attacks come as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu gears up to meet with U.S. President Donald Trump in the White House on Monday. Netanyahu says he'll update the U.S. president on recent developments and discuss next steps of the war.
Myanmar and international rescuers continued to clear away rubble on Monday in Naypyidaw, the country's capital, left by a massive earthquake near Mandalay, Myanmar's second largest city, last week. According to a statement by the ruling military, the death toll rose to over 3,500 on Sunday, with 5,012 people injured and 210 missing. The 7.7 magnitude quake caused significant damage to 6 regions and states.